What if the one thing standing between you and the life you want is not more willpower, talent, or time, but a set of habits your brain runs on autopilot? What if energy isn't some mysterious force you either have or don't, but a practical field you can learn to navigate, direct, and strengthen? Energy Mastery Revealed. The simple steps to take charge is exactly that promise. Clear, repeatable practices that let you steer attention, reshape inner patterns, and produce measurable shifts in focus, mood, and performance. Before anything theoretical, let's prove to yourself that attention changes experience. Try this quick experiment right now. Bring your awareness to your breathing. You don't have to change it, just notice it. Notice the rise and fall in your chest or belly. Follow the air as it enters and as it leaves. Try this for several breaths, long enough to feel at least a small change in how your body and head are registering the moment. Now move your awareness to your hands. Without moving them, sense their weight, temperature, the points where they press against the surface beneath them. Notice any tingling, any tiny warmth, any outline of sensation you normally ignore. Spend a few more breaths with that. If you did that, you may already feel a small shift. Less fizz in the head, a clearer edge, an opening between your thoughts. That tiny change is the beginning of mastery. It demonstrates a central truth. Attention is not neutral. Where you place it alters how you experience reality in real time. That is the practical hinge of the whole method. You can think of your habitual mind as a car with the parking brake on. The engine runs, you can steer, but acceleration is muted, and every uphill requires extra effort. Energy mastery is releasing that brake in small, controlled steps until the vehicle responds the way you intend. It's not about magic. It's about retraining a system that evolved to economize attention so it would keep you alive and functioning. Those same economizing habits that saved you once now keep certain patterns locked in. Reactive loops, anxiety grooves, autopilot routes that keep you stuck in the same outcomes. Why does this happen? Your brain is a filter. From the moment you wake until you sleep, it sorts, subtracts, and condenses the sensory world down to what it calls important. That filter is efficient. It hides the hum of the refrigerator, the background chatter of a room, the sensation of the clothes on your skin. Efficiency is useful, but it also means that many signals, subtle bodily cues, half-formed intentions, micro-opportunities, fade into the background. Over time, those ignored signals become invisible, and the patterns built on them become automatic. You learn to respond the same way in similar situations because the brain has carved a path of least resistance, a neural highway that favors the familiar. Learning to take charge starts with awareness. The simplest step is noticing what your brain is ignoring. The next is deliberately turning the spotlight of attention toward those ignored parts long enough and often enough to make them matter. The good news is that the brain is plastic, flexible, and changeable. Neuroplasticity means that repeated attention and practice form new pathways and strengthen them. Practice doesn't promise instant miracles. It promises change in proportion to repetition, specificity, and clarity of focus. Think of it like building muscle. You don't lift heavier tomorrow. You lift consistently and progressively. The same goes for attention and energy. To make this usable, I want to offer you a concise map, 5 simple steps that take you from confused energy to directed mastery. Later, we'll unpack each with drills, timings, and ways to measure progress. For now, keep these steps in mind as the backbone of everything you try. Step 1. Notice. Open the spotlight on breath, body, sounds, and subtle sensations. The aim is to broaden your field of perception, to find what your brain has dimmed. Step 2. Track. Once you notice, follow the sensation with curiosity. Track it through a simple micro-practice until it becomes less fuzzy and more defined. Step 3. Rehearse. Use brief, vivid mental movies to rehearse the outcome you want. This creates anticipatory neural patterns that support real-world action. Step 4. Adjust expectations. Recognize how the act of observing shifts the situation. Use attention to reroute expectations away from defensive default scripts. Step 5. Apply consistently. Small exposures and repetitions compound. Measure, tweak, and repeat until the new patterns stabilize. Those steps may sound abstract right now, but each one maps to concrete, time-bound practices you can start today. Before we do that, let's anchor the approach in a practical demonstration, another micro-practice that reveals what's been under your habitual radar and why small practices matter. Place your hand gently on your heart and rest the other hand on your thigh. Without changing your breathing pattern intentionally, notice any sounds around you. Then notice any facial sensations, the softness of the jaw, the tension at the temples. Now, for about 20 seconds, shift your attention in a slow scan from the crown of your head down to your toes. Notice how quickly attention drops into thought and judgment, and then gently bring it back to the felt sense in your body. You are training a muscle, the muscle of noticing. This exercise shows two things. First, your baseline experience is constructed from a mix of sensory input and interpretive overlay. Second, small, repeated scans build the capacity to hold an experience without immediately reacting to it. That gap you create is the space where change happens. If you're finding this useful and want a structured plan to begin, there's a 7-day starter pack in the description that walks through the first week in exact practice segments. It's designed to fit into even busy schedules. 3 micro-practices a day, each one short, specific, and measurable. Check the link below if you want a downloadable checklist you can use as you go. Now let's unpack what's getting in the way of taking charge. Understanding the obstacle helps you approach practice with compassion rather than frustration. The brain's filtering system evolved to save energy and automate survival tasks. It forms habits because habits free up processing capacity. They reduce decision fatigue. But habits are blind to your current goals. They run according to patterns set by circumstance and repetition. That is why the same environment triggers the same responses, even when you consciously want something different. Picture your attention like a camera lens. When you first learn to play an instrument or drive a car, the lens is wide and clumsy. You see every small movement and have to correct constantly. Over time, the camera zooms into the crucial mechanics, and the small details drop away. That focused lens is efficient for the task at hand, but it also hides context. What you stop seeing stops influencing your actions. Energy mastery is learning when to narrow the lens and when to open it wider, and doing both with intention. Selective attention also creates emotional filtering. If your brain keeps prioritizing threat or scarcity cues, whether because of past conditioning or repeated stress, it narrows your perception to confirm that state. The loop is self-reinforcing. Attention favors threat signals, which in turn heighten arousal, which then biases attention further toward threat. Breaking that loop doesn't require shutting off feelings. It requires inserting new attentional habits that broaden input and create new confirmation patterns. This is where neuroplasticity becomes your tool. When you target specific micro-behaviors and repeat them, you slowly change the weighting your brain assigns to different signals. The more you focus on subtle somatic cues, the more your nervous system recognizes them as relevant. The more you rehearse an action in your mind with sensory richness, the more pre-activated the associated networks become. These shifts are plausible, measurable, and practical. They happen through practice, not by wishing. Let's dive into Step 1 with detail and a set of specific practices you can do immediately. Step 1. Notice the daily micro-checks. The purpose here is expansion, to widen your field of perception enough that small cues you used to miss become available for action. Practice A. The 60-second breath anchor. Several times a day, whenever you can, take 60 seconds to anchor to the breath.
No forcing, no trying to be calm, simply count or feel 3 full breaths and notice the way air fills and leaves the body. These 60 seconds are not about relaxation alone. They are a training interval for attention. Start with 3 cycles a day and build to 6. Practice B, the sensory microscan. Once in the morning and once in the evening, close your eyes for 30 to 60 seconds and do a slow head-to-toe scan. Notice temperature differences, pressure points, small tensions. If you feel overwhelmed by sensations, shorten the scan to 15 seconds and focus only on the hands or feet. The goal is not to resolve every sensation, but to increase signal-to-noise ratio for subtle inputs. Practice C, environmental checkpoint. On 2 occasions in your day, perhaps before a meeting and after lunch, pause and note 3 ambient sounds and 1 small physical sensation. Naming them aloud or in your head increases salience. The practice teaches your brain that peripheral information matters. It trains the lens to include more context. These 3 practices are short, flexible, and meant to integrate with your life. They are not a replacement for sleep, therapy, or medical care. They are attentional training slots that make change possible. Once you're building the noticing capacity, you move to step 2, tracking, which is where precision begins. Tracking converts fuzzy awareness into sustained attention on a single, often subtle signal. Step 2, track, the art of sustained, curious attention. This practice is about following a single thread without reacting to it. Practice D, the hand sense drill. Place your hands loosely in your lap and focus on the left hand only for 20 to 30 seconds. Notice the surface textures, the slightest warmth of the skin, the vibration of the pulse if present. Avoid the urge to judge or fix, simply follow. Repeat with the right hand. Do this twice a day. Over weeks, the hand sense becomes richer and less blurry. What starts as a tiny dot of awareness deepens into clear feedback. Practice E, the sound follow. In a busy environment, pick one sound, a hum, a distant conversation, and listen to it for 20 seconds without letting your mind narrate or translate it into meaning. The practice trains selective attention without narrative interference. It's a direct route to decreasing reactivity because it strengthens the circuit that can hold sensation without immediate evaluation. Why track rather than just notice? Because tracking builds specificity. Noticing says, there's something there. Tracking says, I'm going to follow this one thing precisely. That distinction is crucial. Tracking creates discriminative pathways in your brain, which allow you to respond with choice rather than habit. Now, step 3, rehearse, is where attention becomes intentional scaffolding for action. Rehearsal is distinct from fantasy. It is sensory-rich simulation structured to prime the brain for concrete behavior. Step 3, rehearse. Short, vivid mental movies that prepare the brain. When athletes imagine a successful move with detail, the feel of the surface underfoot, the sound of the crowd, the timing of muscle contractions, neural systems associated with act execution light up similarly to when they actually move. You can use the same principle for focus, speaking, negotiation, or any task where mental prediction and preparedness matters. Practice F, the 3-minute mental movie. Before a task you care about, a presentation, a workout, a difficult conversation, spend 3 minutes mentally rehearsing the sequence you want. Start with a calm posture, then imagine the first concrete moments, you walking in, the sensory cues of the room, the way you breathe for the first 30 seconds, the exact phrasing of your opening line. Make it vivid. Include tactile cues, emotional register, steady, not frantic, and a micro-behavioral anchor like pressing a finger to a knuckle. Repeat the mental movie twice a day for the same task if it repeats frequently. Practice G, the micro-outcome rehearsal. For tiny daily wins, sending an email you avoid or making an important phone call, rehearse the first 60 seconds of the interaction and the feeling of relief afterwards. This practice shifts anticipatory dread into a sequence of manageable steps and gives your brain a template for success. Rehearsal is not wishful thinking. It's training the nervous system to expect and be ready for a particular outcome. Do it with specificity and sensory detail, and you'll notice that real-world execution often becomes less effortful and more precise. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, I can notice, track, and rehearse.
But where does the metaphor of energy fit? And what about those more exotic metaphors I sometimes hear? Quantum this, entanglement that? Let's be clear and careful. As a helpful metaphor, not a claim about physics, imagine a mirror that reflects not only what you look at, but how you look at it. Your attention is the hand that tilts that mirror. When you look with anxiety, the mirror tends to catch smaller, sharper details that confirm fear. When you look with curiosity and calm, the mirror expands the field and reveals possibilities. The metaphor isn't physics. It's a practical image that helps you remember how observation influences experience. There is also value in the metaphor of a connected field. Think of energy as a local field that changes shape when you apply attention. It's not a literal rewriting of physical laws. It's a way to conceptualize how focused intention reconfigures the meaningful patterns in your perception and in the systems you interact with. Using these metaphors can spark creative strategies, but they do not substitute for disciplined, repeated practice.
Before moving on to steps 4 and 5, and before offering a compact 7-day protocol that synthesizes everything, let's ground what we've covered with some real-world examples so you can see how the approach scales. Imagine an athlete learning a new technique. Initially, every movement is conscious and clumsy. The coach asks them to notice a single joint angle and rehearse it mentally before practice. Over weeks, the athlete moves from conscious correction to effortless execution. The same pattern applies to a public speaker who tracks the breath before talking and rehearses the opening 3 lines. The speaker shifts from adrenaline-driven fragmentation to controlled presence. In leadership, someone who tracks their physiological signs of escalation, a tightening stomach, quickened breath, and rehearses a short centering routine before an important conversation can transform a fight-or-flight flash into a measured response that builds trust rather than destroys it. These are not miracles. They are consistent, measurable changes resulting from attention and repetition. The pattern is predictable. Targeted attention produces small shifts. Small shifts compounded over time yield visible changes in performance and subjective state. Now, because practicality is the point, I will give you a compact 7-day starter plan that you can begin today. It's short, specific, and designed to introduce the 3 core practices: notice, track, rehearse, while also cultivating the habit of consistency. Use whichever days work for you as day 1. The structure is flexible, but the timing and frequency matter. 7-day starter plan: daily micro-practices and measurable targets. Day 1, foundation. Morning, 60-second breath anchor, 3 full cycles. Midday, sensory microscan, 30 seconds. Evening, hand sense drill, 2 20-second rounds. Log how you feel on a 1 to 5 scale for clarity. Day 2, strengthen noticing. Morning, 60-second breath anchor. Midday, environmental checkpoint. Name 3 sounds and 1 sensation. Evening, 3-minute mental movie for a small task you have tomorrow. Rate focus and anxiety after each practice. Day 3, introduce tracking. Morning, breath anchor. Midday, hand sense drill, 2 30-second rounds. Evening, sound follow, 20 seconds on 1 sound. Note any changes in distractedness. Day 4, rehearsal practice. Morning, breath anchor, plus a 3-minute mental movie for the day's main goal. Midday, sensory microscan. Evening, micro outcome rehearsal for a minor challenge. Track ease of action. Day 5, focused repetition. Morning, breath anchor and hand sense drill. Midday, environmental checkpoint. Evening, rehearse a performance you expect this week. Rate confidence. Day 6, combine and test. Morning, 60-second breath anchor. Then a short 60-second rehearsal for a specific event. Midday, tracking drill of your choice. Evening, reflective scan, noting 3 micro wins of the week. Day 7, measure and adjust. Morning, full kit, breath anchor, hand sense, 3-minute rehearsal. Midday, take a note of which practice felt most effective. Evening, commit to a 3-practice daily rhythm for the following week and set 1 measurable metric to track, e.g., number of distractions during a work block or baseline mood rating. Each day takes roughly 5 to 10 minutes if you follow the suggested schedule. The point is not duration, but fidelity and frequency. Keep a simple log, a note on your phone or a line in a notebook to track the practices and 2 quick metrics, perceived focus and perceived energy on a 1 to 5 scale. The log is your measurement tool. It teaches you to see cause and effect. As you begin this week, expect resistance. That resistance is part of the system learning to reprioritize signals. You may notice boredom, impatience, or the mind telling you the practices are silly. Those are ordinary signs that an old pathway wants to remain dominant. Treat resistance as a data point, not a verdict on your ability. If you persist, even in small ways, the brain forms new valleys through which energy can flow more freely. At this stage, you've learned the conceptual backbone, felt a few micro-practices, and received a simple 7-day plan. The remaining sections of this method dig deeper into 2 crucial areas we haven't fully explored yet: how to use expectation and observation to influence outcomes without superstition, and how to design progressive exposure so small practice turns into stable mastery. Both require careful attention because they are where subtlety matters most. Observation and expectation are twin levers. When you expect a meeting to go badly, your body prepares for threat and your attention narrows. That prepares you for defensive behavior, which can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Conversely, when you intentionally set an expectation that emphasizes specific small behaviors, for example, I will breathe steadily and ask one clarifying question, you lower the stakes and increase the probability of a constructive outcome. This is not magical thinking. It's strategic use of attention to alter physiological and cognitive precursors of behavior. There is a smart way to reframe expectation that avoids naive optimism and instead leans on concrete, controllable inputs. Instead of predicting outcomes, predict processes. Say, I will notice my posture, breathe for 30 seconds, and open with a clarifying question. That prediction is actionable and trainable. When you focus on process, you create a chain of micro-decisions that you can reinforce through rehearsal and tracking. One more conceptual point before we pause. Emotional states are not fixed identities. They are patterns of activation that your attention can modulate. The more practiced you become at noticing the onset of a feeling and tracking how it moves through your body, the more options you have to intervene before it becomes a full-blown reactive script. That gap between impulse and action, the gap you widen through noticing and tracking, is the operative field of mastery. At this juncture, you have a toolkit and a short plan to begin practicing. You know why your habits exist, how attention functions, and how small repeated practices alter the brain's weighting of information. You have concrete drills for noticing, tracking, and rehearsing, and a 7-day scaffold that introduces them with clear timings. What comes next is the art of progressive application, how to take these micro skills and use them in the messy complexity of real tasks. Negotiations that matter, presentations that have consequences, workouts where you want precise technique, or daily routines where you want less reactivity and more agency. This requires a method for breaking complex outcomes into their component microbehaviors, designing rehearsals for each, and sequencing exposures so the brain can learn without overwhelm. We will get into that sequencing and the specific metrics you can use to know whether you are improving. We'll also explore how to map triggers that pull you back into old pathways and how to design tiny experiments to test new responses. For now, begin with the week. Do the practices with curiosity and consistency. Use the checklist if you grabbed it from the link. Notice what shifts in the first 3 days and log it. The tiny changes you encounter will be evidence that the system is learning. When you try the breath anchor and the hand sense drill, pay attention not just to how calm you feel, but to how often your brain defaults to a story about what is happening. Count the interruptions. Track the drift. Those counts are the objective measures that show growth over time. As the counts decrease and clarity increases, you will have empirical reasons to keep practicing rather than relying on motivation alone. Up to this point, we've laid the foundation: the promise, immediate experience, diagnosis of the problem, scientific anchor in neuroplasticity, concrete practices for the first 3 steps, and a 1-week starter plan. The next stage is where things intensify, integrating expectation management, designing progressive exposures, and using visualization and rehearsal as daily weapons for consistency. That is where the real leverage lies, and where we move from practicing techniques to mastering energy in contexts that matter. Before we move there, pause and notice how you feel after reading and doing the practices so far. Do you sense a subtle widening of perception, a small drop in reactivity, a new sense of choice? These are the early micro-wins you should note in your log. They are the data points that will tell you whether to keep the same routine or make small adjustments. When you're ready, we'll take those micro-skills and fold them into a reproducible protocol for ramping exposure, shoring up new neural pathways, and using the observer effect in ways that help rather than mystify.
That protocol is the bridge from short-term experiments to lasting mastery. When you're ready, take a breath and let the plan get practical. We've already built the foundation. Notice, track, rehearse, and given you a 7-day scaffold to begin. Now the task is to turn those micro skills into a reproducible training system, a sequence of small exposures, clear metrics, and tiny experiments that let you expand capacity without overwhelm. Below is a step-by-step method for doing exactly that, with concrete templates you can copy, tweak, and use in any performance or life context. Designing a progressive exposure ladder. Start by breaking the outcome you want into the smallest observable behaviors you can reliably practice. Think of a ladder. Each rung is a micro-behavior that leads to the next. The ladder approach prevents the trap of trying to change everything at once. Example ladder for a presentation. Rung 1. Walk into the room and stand still with feet rooted for 5 seconds. Rung 2. Take 3 full breaths and orient to the first person you'll address. Rung 3. Deliver the opening line while maintaining steady breath for the first 30 seconds. Rung 4. Pause and accept one question with an open posture. Each rung is simple, measurable, and repeatable. Your job is to rehearse the lower rungs until they feel automatic, then add the next. How to build your own ladder. 1. Identify a single outcome you care about this week, a meeting, a workout, a difficult call. 2. Decompose it into 5 to 8 micro-behaviors, tiny, observable actions that could each be rehearsed for 1 to 3 minutes. 3. Order them from least to most challenging. 4. Assign practice frequency. Start with at least 1 rehearsal of the first rung each day, and 1 full run-through of the first 2 or 3 rungs every other day. 5. After 1 week, test the next rung. If it's too hard, add an intermediate rung. The advantage of the ladder is the incremental wins. Each rung you master is a measurable nudge in the right direction, and those nudges compound into real skill. A simple protocol for sequencing exposure over 8 weeks. You don't need to do all 8 weeks. Think of this as an optional roadmap for steady, low-risk progress. Weeks 1-2. Consolidate noticing. Keep the 3 daily micro-practices from your 7-day plan. Track 2 metrics, perceived focus, 1 to 5, and distraction count per work block. Log daily. Weeks 3-4. Deepen tracking. Add the hand sense drill twice daily and the sound follow practice in 1 noisy environment. Begin rehearsing 1 micro rung from your ladder daily for 3 minutes. Weeks 5-6. Intensify rehearsal. Do 2 3-minute mental movies daily for the same task. One focusing on the first 60 seconds, the other on recovery if things go off plan. Introduce 1 deliberate, slightly stressful exposure each week, a short mock presentation, a tougher set in the gym. Weeks 7-8. Integrate and test.
Run full ladder rehearsals twice a week and perform at least 1 authentic, unmocked trial, a real meeting, a performance, a negotiation. Compare your baseline metrics to current ones and adjust. A key rule: increase challenge slowly and predictably. If a new rung feels likely to derail you, split it into smaller steps. The goal is repeated success, not a dramatic single victory. Constructing tiny experiments, the lab method. Treat each change like a laboratory experiment. This approach keeps your learning curious, measurable, and non-judgmental. Step A. Define a clear hypothesis. Example, if I do a 60-second breath anchor before a 25-minute work block, my distraction count will drop by at least 1. Step B. Choose one metric. Keep it simple. Distraction count, task completion rate, mood/energy on a 1 to 5 scale, time to return to task after interruption. Step C. Control variables. Keep other things constant. Same time of day, same work block duration, same environment if possible. Step D. Run the test for a fixed period. 1 week is minimal, 2 weeks is better. Step E. Review. Compare your metric before and during the experiment. If there's improvement, standardize the practice. If not, tweak the variation and test again. Tiny experiments reduce the pressure of all or nothing change and build a habit of curious feedback. They make personal discovery systematic. Measuring what matters. Easy metrics that actually tell a story. You don't need complex analytics. Pick 2 primary metrics and 1 secondary qualitative note. Primary metrics. Pick 2. Distraction count per 25 to 45-minute work block. Number of times you notice and name an escalation sign in a conversation. Number of successful first 60-second executions of your ladder during real events per week. Secondary qualitative metric. A daily 1-line log. Most notable micro win today or biggest source of drift. Use simple tools, a note app, a pocket notebook, or a single spreadsheet with dates and a column for each metric. The act of logging itself strengthens attention. It makes you accountable to the system you're building. Mapping triggers and designing interventions. Triggers are the hooks that pull you back into automaticity. A flashing phone, a sarcastic comment from a coworker, a pile of unread emails, or the familiar cortisol spike when something unexpected happens. Mapping them gives you foresight. How to create a trigger map. 1. For 1 week, carry a shorthand log. When you notice a reactive habit, write down the trigger in 1 phrase and the habitual response in 1 phrase. Example, trigger, late email at 9 p.m. Response, doom scroll for 20 minutes. 2. At the end of the day, pick the 3 most frequent or costly triggers. 3. For each trigger, design 1 tiny intervention that can be executed in under 60 seconds and is rehearsable. Use the formula. If trigger, then microaction.
Examples. 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 If I get a late email, then I will take 3 full breaths and set a 5-minute inbox time tomorrow. If someone criticizes, then I will place my hand on my chest and count to 3 before responding. If my focus drifts during a work block, then I will do a single hand sense drill for 20 seconds. Implementation intentions like these are powerful because they convert intention into automatic response patterns. Rehearse the if-then in your mental movie. Picture the trigger and run the microaction until it becomes the default. Designing rehearsals for complexity. The micro-movie template. We covered the 3-minute mental movie earlier. Now turn that into a repeatable template so rehearsals become specific and richly sensory every time you do them. Micro-movie template, 3 minutes. 1. Scene setting, 20 to 30 seconds. Imagine the location with sensory detail, sight, sound, temperature. Anchor your posture and breath. 2. First 60 seconds, 60 seconds. Rehearse the exact opening actions, how you stand, sit, your first sentence, the tactile anchor, finger press, foot on floor. Emphasize rhythm over content. 3. Key behavioral node, 30 to 45 seconds. Focus on 1 micro skill you want to execute, softening the jaw, slowing speech, scanning the crowd for friendly faces. 4. Disruption and recovery, 30 to 45 seconds. Imagine a plausible interruption, an unexpected question, a missed beat, and rehearse the recovery behavior. 3 breaths, naming the interruption, bringing forward your first clarifying question. 5. Finish and settle, 10 to 20 seconds. Picture the moment after the success, small relief, a satisfied posture. Anchor that feeling as your reward. Repeat this micro-movie before events and once in the morning on days where that task is central. Over time, add sensory detail. Imagine the weight of the microphone, the creak of the chair, the tone of the room's lighting. Contrast rehearsal. Prepare for unpredictability. One reason many rehearsals fail to transfer is they are too smooth. Real life is messy, so add contrast to your rehearsal. Deliberately rehearse the moment when things go wrong and practice the recovery. Contrast rehearsal builds robustness. Example contrast sequence for a phone call you dread. Rehearse the call going smoothly for 90 seconds. Rehearse the same call with a sudden interruption, child noise, a dropped connection, and practice the recovery. I'll take 2 breaths and ask to repeat the last point. Repeat both versions twice. This kind of practice reduces the surprise factor and helps the nervous system default to a calm recovery instead of panic. Applying the method, detailed scenarios. To help you scale this across contexts, here are precise, repeatable micro-protocols for common performance domains. Presentation/speaking. Pre-performance kit, 2 to 4 minutes total. 60-second breath anchor, 20-second hand sense on chest, 3-minute micro-movie for the opening 90 seconds.
Event rung practice. Event rung practice. Execute the first 30 seconds as practiced. If you notice escalation signs, press the hand-to-chest anchor and count to 3. Measurement. Count the number of times you intentionally used a recovery anchor during the event. Rate perceived presence 1 to 5 after each session. Negotiation/difficult conversation. Pre-call. 60-second breath anchor, 60-second rehearsal of first clarifying question. Ladder rungs. Opening 30 seconds. Silence after a critical point for 3 seconds. Asking a clarifying question. Experiment. Set a small hypothesis. If I use a clarifying question after each offer, the conversation will stay under 30% reactive reframe attempts. Track across 3 conversations. Athletic practice/technical movement. Warm micro kit. 60-second breath and joint-focused hand sense. Touch the area you're training. 3-minute mental movie of the first repetition with exact joint angles. Ladder. Single controlled rep with awareness. 3 controlled reps with pacing. Integration into full set. Measurement. Degree of technique fidelity, self-rated or coach-rated across sets. Creative work/deep focus blocks. Pre-block ritual. 60-second breath anchor and a 20-second sensory microscan. Practice. Set a 25-minute focused block. Count distractions and time to return. Experiment. Compare distraction counts with and without a pre-block rehearsal over 5 sessions. Parenting, high-emotion interactions. Micro-anchor. Before entering a potentially charged interaction, do 1 breath anchor and a hand sense, 20 seconds. Ladder. 1. Pause at the doorway and breathe. 2. Make a neutral opening statement. 3. Name 1 specific observable behavior, I notice you dropped your cup, before advice. Measurement. Number of times you used a neutral opening versus reactive phrase. These templates are intentionally brief. The constraint of time is part of the design. Short practices are easier to insert and more likely to be repeated. Troubleshooting common obstacles. Even with a simple system, people run into predictable problems. Here are common issues and targeted fixes. Obstacle. I forget to practice. Fix. Habit stack the micro practices with an existing routine. Do the 60-second breath right after your morning coffee, or after you close your laptop each evening. Use a visual cue. Stick a small note on your laptop, or set a single daily reminder on your phone at a consistent time. Obstacle. The practice feels boring. Fix. Add curiosity. Use the sound follow to pick the oddest ambient noise you can find. Track 1 surprising detail each session and write it down. Boredom often masks the early S-curve of learning. The novelty returns when you focus on nuance. Obstacle. I skip when life gets busy. Fix. Microdose. Cut the practice to its smallest credible form. 1 breath, 1 hand sense, 1 micro movie of 30 to 60 seconds. Short bursts preserve continuity and reduce friction. Obstacle. No measurable change. Fix. Re-examine your metric and fidelity. Are you actually doing the practice as prescribed?
Are you tracking consistently? Try a 2-week experiment where you log every practice, even if you think you did it badly. That data will reveal patterns. Overcoming plateaus. Plateaus are normal. When you hit one, change one variable at a time. Increase difficulty slightly, change the context, or add variability. For example, if your hand sense richness stops improving, try shifting to another body part to see if the system generalizes. If you've mastered the first rungs of your ladder, add more realistic disruptors to rehearsals. If your subjective energy ratings plateau, examine sleep, nutrition, and social variables. They interact with attention even if they're outside the direct practice. Using the observer effect wisely. We've used the idea of the observer effect as a metaphor. Attention changes experience. Let's be precise and practical about how to use it without slipping into mysticism. A short caveat. As a helpful metaphor, not a claim about physics, think of observation as an action that changes probabilities rather than certainties. When you attend to a variable, you increase the likelihood of a particular set of outcomes by shifting the system's initial conditions. That is operationally useful. How to use the observer effect practically. 1. Before an event, set a narrow observational intent. I will monitor my breath for the first pause. Narrow intentions are actionable and measurable. 2. During the event, use observation to create early corrective feedback loops. Noticing tension can trigger a breath anchor. Noticing a drifting gaze can trigger a scan for audience signals. 3. After the event, review your logs with the question, what did I observe that predicted success or failure? This turns observation into learning. Quantum metaphors revisited with caution. Occasionally, you'll hear language like attention collapses possibilities or entanglement of intention. Such phrases can be evocative. Use them as imagination tools, not as literal explanations. They can help you remember the active role of attention, but do not substitute for measurement and practice. The useful takeaway is simple. Focused observation changes the space of probable responses. Test it and measure the change. Scaling mastery, from micro to system. Once you have reliable micro behaviors, the next step is integration, choreographing them into rituals and environmental designs that support sustained change. Rituals and anchors. Create a short ritual you perform before any high-stakes action. Rituals create predictable mind-body states and reduce decision friction. A universal pre-performance ritual, 90 to 120 seconds. 60-second breath anchor. 20-second hand sense on the diaphragm or throat, where you want presence. 30-second micro movie, of the first rung plus a quick contrast rehearsal. Make that ritual portable. It should require no props and be feasible in bathrooms, hallways, or parking lots. Environmental design. Shape the context to nudge the desired behavior. If distraction is a problem, remove the visual cue for the phone. If you struggle to rehearse, put a small index card with your ladder rungs on the desk. The smallest changes in the environment can dramatically reduce friction. Social scaffolding. Tell one trusted person about your practice and ask for simple accountability. A weekly check-in, a short message after a mock run, or a quick reaction in a group chat. Social scaffolding multiplies consistency. Case studies, short, practical. Sam, a mid-level manager stuck in reactive meetings. Sam noticed that he often turned defensive in feedback sessions. He built a ladder, 5 seconds of grounding at the doorway, a breath anchor before speaking, and a rehearsed clarifying question. He logged each meeting for 2 weeks, counting the number of times he used the breath anchor and rating the meeting outcome. Over 2 weeks, his perceived reactivity dropped from 4.5 to 2.5, and colleagues reported clearer outcomes. His secret was the simple if-then plan. If I feel my jaw tighten, then I take 2 breaths and ask a clarifying question. Ava, a violinist polishing technique. Ava's technique faltered under performance pressure. She used the hand sense drill to increase proprioceptive awareness in her left hand and employed the micro movie before each rehearsal. She mapped her triggers, nervousness before concerts, and designed a ritual that included contrast rehearsal for unexpected slips. Over a month, she reported better control in the first minute of each piece and fewer technical errors. These stories are small-scale and replicable. They show that modest practice plus measurement yields usable gains. Designing your feedback loop. Review and adapt every 7 days. Set a weekly review rhythm that takes no more than 10 to 15 minutes. Use 3 questions. 1. What practices did I do consistently this week? 2. Which metric moved in the direction I wanted? 3. What is one small change I will make next week? The weekly review is mission control. It keeps you grounded in evidence and prevents the hope for motivation trap. Language and expectation management. What to say to yourself. The words you use about your practice matter. Replace vague statements like "I'll try to be more present" with specific process intentions. I will do the 60-second breath anchor before every work block. When you fail, describe what happened as data, not as a failure of character. I missed 2 anchors this week, likely because my routine shifted. I'll attach the anchor to my caffeine routine to increase compliance. This neutral, solution-focused language keeps you in a learning stance.
A few more micro practices to expand your toolkit. The 2-second reset. Whenever you notice escalation, take 2 seconds to press your thumb to your index finger and inhale. A tiny anchor that interrupts automatic escalation without needing a long break. The peripheral check. During conversation, aim to notice one nonverbal signal in the first 30 seconds. Someone's hands, posture, or breathing rate. This widens your lens and reduces projection. The reverse rehearsal. Imagine the best possible outcome. Then imagine the steps that made it possible backward. This helps identify the real levers rather than wishful endpoints. Ethics of attention, responsibility, and consent. Mastering energy in social contexts carries responsibility. Use your increased capacity to create safety and clarity, not manipulation. If you use techniques to stabilize yourself before a difficult conversation, do it to show up more transparent and humane, not to win at the expense of others. When to seek help. These methods are about attention, performance, and practical resilience. They are not replacements for professional mental health or medical care. If you notice persistent impairment, sustained inability to function, severe anxiety, depression, or significant physical symptoms, seek support from qualified professionals. The practices we've described are complements, not substitutes. Putting it all together, a compact, reproducible day. Here's a sample daily routine that folds noticing, tracking, and rehearsal into a single realistic flow. Morning, 5 minutes. 60-second breath anchor, 3 full breaths. 60-second micro movie for the day's main event. Quick log entry, set 2 metrics for the day. Midday, 2 to 3 minutes. Environmental checkpoint, name 3 sounds and 1 physical sensation. Hand sense drill for 30 seconds. Pre-task, 1 to 3 minutes. 60-second breath anchor, 30 to 60-second micro movie for the specific task. If-then cue ready. Evening, 3 to 5 minutes. Sensory microscan, 60 seconds. 2-line log, perceived focus today and 1 micro win. This template takes 11 to 16 minutes total and fits into most days. Start here, then adapt to your reality. The climb from habit to mastery. Mastery is not a single event. It's the cumulative effect of thousands of tiny choices and rehearsals. Your attention is the instrument you tune. The practices in this method, notice, track, rehearse, adjust expectations, and apply consistently, are the tuning process. Each short practice slightly changes the shape of your nervous system's response. When you string those changes together through ladders, experiments, and rehearsal, your nervous system begins to expect new behaviors. That expectation changes how you respond in the moment, which changes how the people and systems around you respond, looping back into an environment that supports your new state.
A final micro-protocol to start tomorrow. If you want one clear set of actions to do immediately tomorrow, no more than 5 minutes total, do this. 1. Morning. 60-second breath anchor, 3 full breaths. 2. Midday, hand sense drill, 20-30 seconds per hand. 3. Before your main task, 3-minute micro movie of the first 60 seconds plus 1 contrast rehearsal. 4. Evening, 1-line log, best micro win, and 1 adjustment for tomorrow. Commit to that for 7 days, measure your 2 chosen metrics, and run a short weekly review. That small, disciplined rhythm is the engine of mastery. Reclaiming attention, reclaiming agency. Energy mastery is, at its core, about reclaiming the simplest human competence, where you place your attention and what you do with that placement. Attention is not a passive resource, it is a muscle and a tool. When you train it with clear steps, notice, track, rehearse, adjust, and apply, you turn vague intention into reliable action. You are not reshaping your life with a single heroic effort. You're reorganizing how your brain prioritizes information and how your body responds to it. That is steady, patient work, and it yields compound results. Think small, be consistent, and treat your experiments like data, not moral tests. If this method gave you a clear next step, try the short routine tomorrow. Use the 7-day starter if you haven't yet, and begin logging 2 simple metrics. If you're ready to take a deeper dive, pick 1 ladder and start rehearsing its first rung daily. If this helped, like the video, comment "I'm ready" with 1 small step you'll try this week, and subscribe so you don't miss practical trainings like this. Share 1 micro win in the comments. What you notice counts, and it matters. Energy Mastery Revealed, the simple steps to take charge, is not a slogan, it's a practice. Start small, measure honestly, and let the work compound. Your attention is the place where change begins. Take it back, 1 breath, 1 hand, 1 rehearsal at a time.